Greetings, everyone. The weekend of July 20th saw the release of Rambo Last Blood, the fifth of the franchise. In this live roundtable, where anything can happen, we'll be talking about the good and the bad of the movie, the reviews and their blatant bias, the box office, and whether or not the movie is successful, and what the future might hold for Rambo after this. Joining me to discuss all that is, as usual, Tom Connors
Hello.
and Matthew Kadish, author of the Earthman Jack books.
Hey yo, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, and I hope all of you in the chat are doing great as well. Let's see, who do we have here? Chris Corkum, greetings. Semantic Dragon, John Wong, Rock Flanagan, Cyborg Andre, yeah, that would be me. Dr. McElvoyd, Lincoln Bluesman. Anyway, welcome every single one of you, Keith Howard and the rest. So let's get into Rambo Last Blood. Guys, before we get into the specifics of what we liked and what we disliked, let's begin by just giving our general overall impression of the movie. Tom, why don't you go first on this one?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was more about, how do I put this? I think it was a little bit more about the war coming to Rambo instead of Rambo going to war in this instance, and we'll get into that kind of stuff later on. But I liked it. I liked that it was different. There's things I would have preferred to be different. There's some issues I do have. Overall, it's like a 7 out of 10. It's probably ranked right after Rambo 2 in my book. So it's like First Blood, Part 4, Rambo 2, this movie, then Rambo 3. So it's not the worst of the bunch, but it's not the best, obviously, by a long shot. Yeah, it did have some pacing issues, kind of to a point, like Andre said, but I think there's a big chunk of this movie missing, and we'll probably get into that as well later on. Matt?
Well, overall, did not like this movie. I didn't think it was a bad action movie. I thought it was a very kind of middle of the road Stallone action flick, like the type you'd see go straight to Netflix or something like that. So I don't think it was a bad movie per se, but I felt like it was a very bad Rambo movie. I did not like what they did with the character. I felt like the story had a lot of issues in terms of plot contrivances, and like the whole movie felt like kind of an excuse for the last 20 minutes of the film. Basically just like they knew where their bread was buttered, and everything else was just kind of filler leading up to that. So overall, I'd give it like 2 out of 5 stars. In terms of the franchise overall, this was my least favorite Rambo movie. I would definitely put 3 above this one, but for me, it's First Blood, Rambo Part 4, First Blood Part 2, Rambo 3, and then this movie, because I really felt like this wasn't a Rambo movie. I felt like the main character in this could have just been any generic, action movie hero, and it would have been the exact same movie. I don't feel like this needed to be a Rambo film. This was just a generic, straight-to-video action film that had the Rambo title slapped onto it. At least that's my take.
As for me, I agree a little bit with both of you. I probably side more with Tom, though, because I did enjoy the movie overall. I don't have any huge grievances with the story of any kind. I do, however, have technical grievances with the manner in which that story was executed. We'll get back into those details a little bit later. Where I would rank it among the other Rambo movies, I don't really know. The one simply called Rambo and the original First Blood, they are definitely number 1 and number 2. Which is 1 and which is 2, that I cannot say for certain. What I can say, though, is that this one is... I think that I liked First Blood Part 2 more than this one. I'd have to rewatch Rambo 3 one more time to see if I like that one more than I did Last Blood. But I think probably I prefer Last Blood to Rambo 3. Probably I do. So overall, I enjoyed the movie, but it did have its issues, and we'll get into those issues in due time. But first, let's say what we liked about the movie. Matt, let's begin with you. You're the one that liked the movie the least of us, but did you find anything to like in Last Blood?
Well, the whole third act was fantastic. Basically, I felt like the violence, the way the violence was handled in the movie, was very well done. It was in your face. It was unapologetic. It was very graphic and brutal. It didn't make any bones about what it was. It was like, hey, you know, this is how we're killing people. Yeah, pretty much only the action and the violence in the movie was the stuff that I really liked. There was kind of a surprising development about 2/3 of the way through the film that kind of took me a little bit off guard. But so like I was kind of surprised by that in a pleasant way. But overall, I felt like there was very little in this movie to enjoy from my perspective because I didn't like how it ended things for the character, and I didn't like a lot of the setup that they had going into the third act of the film. But the last act of this movie was just like it was pure 80s action schlock, and it was glorious.
All right.
Tom, what did you like?
Well, are we getting into spoilers yet, or?
Yeah, sure.
All right,
I mean,
so
we would, Joe, in case we
slowly,
didn't
there
make
you go.
that abundantly clear.
Well, I figured I didn't know if we were
Everyone,
gonna.
this
Yeah,
is a spoilers cast, so there will be full-on spoilers here.
yeah, because we didn't say it yet, and I didn't know if we were gonna do part of it without, and then. But all right, we're getting into spoilers. I liked a lot of this movie. Frankly, I like how it was set up. I like that it gave Rambo, even if it was just a temporary piece in his life, that he found this surrogate family and the responsibility of this girl, and she kind of became his new heart and soul. And then when that was taken away from him, we seen him react. And there's ways he acts and doesn't act in the film that we'll get into later. But the things that I did like was just the whole presence of Rambo. And to kind of go with what Matt's saying is, yeah, there's part of this where you could say it isn't necessarily your typical Rambo movie, because anybody can go see this without ever seeing any of the other Rambo movies before. You don't have to have seen them. The persona of Rambo alone is enough to go into this movie with, because knowing that's enough to feed into the story. Because otherwise, as a standalone movie, if you don't at least have a little bit of an idea of who Rambo is, that's where I'll go against what you're saying, Matt, just a little bit. If you don't know who he is, then obviously you're going to be like, well, why should any of these guys care about this old guy? Well, we know why they should care about this old guy, because he's Rambo and we know what he's capable of. They don't. So as long as you know who he is and what he's capable of going into this movie, you're fine, whether you've seen Rambo 2, 3, or 4. Now, the other stuff I liked is I liked just how Rambo played things out. I thought the story overall was decent. Yeah, it had some issues here and there, like I said, we'll get into, but the big part I liked was the ending too, as well. Like Matt said, I do like the twist in the middle. I didn't expect her to die. I really didn't expect them to do that. It was kind of a surprise, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, Rambo needs that motivation. I get that, and I it kind of goes along with the whole thing with him saying death follows him wherever he goes and takes away everything he loves eventually. So he just has to, deal with that. And I'm rambling now about this, but anyway, Andre, what did you like overall? Because my thoughts are everywhere about this movie. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, I understand completely, and I kind of like have the same thing. My thoughts are a little bit everywhere. What I did like, for one thing, is basically seeing that it continued so perfectly from where the previous one left off on his father's ranch, and he seems to have like gotten his life somewhat in order, which is most welcome. And what else is most welcome is the new guy joining us, Mr. H Reviews, only 20 minutes late.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do apologise.
But
I
it's
just
always
slide in
good to
there.
have you on.
Now the party can start. He's only got to answer one or two things, so he's good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, it's crazy.
But before we let you chime in, I'm just going to continue with what I enjoyed about the movie. So I enjoyed basically just seeing Rambo have some semblance of peace, which is something that he deserves, however limited it may be. And then I kind of like enjoyed that the story shines some level of light on the cartels. Because that's, I think, a really underdeveloped issue. Or not underdeveloped per se, but it's an issue that doesn't get quite a lot of, or it doesn't get the attention it kind of deserves. Because those guys in the cartels, like, have you seen the kind of stuff they do to each other and to local law enforcement and their victims and everything? I mean, those guys, they could hold their own in a game of can you top this with the Islamic State? So yeah, like
That's a good way of
showing
putting
what
it.
they're what they're capable of and everything. I kind of like that the movie is willing to go there and just continue to do what the previous movie did, which is basically take a conflict which is really bad, really brutal, but doesn't get enough news attention and then shine a light on it. So that was pretty cool. Also, I liked the sets because the movie wasn't filmed in Mexico because Mexico is too dangerous to film in. Instead, it was filmed in Tenerife, and I recognized those places because I've spent a lot of time in Tenerife, and it's filmed in Los Gladiolos and El Taco, and I spent a month there this summer. That was pretty cool.
You spent a month in El Taco.
Actually, it's called just Taco, not El Taco. No, I wasn't in
That
Taco.
sounds like the greatest place in the world. I want to move there.
But no, I was in Santa Cruz, and Taco is like one of the regions. Actually, it's a ghetto there, and I had to like go pass through it several times. But yeah, that was pretty cool. So overall, loads of things to like in that movie. And now, Mr. H, the table is yours. What did you like about Rambo Last Blood? And then we'll get into dislikes and everything like that later.
Well, contrary to what a lot of people are saying, I actually really liked the editing. I thought the editing was actually really, really quite good. Color grading was fantastic. The cinematography on a whole was something that I thought was really, really decent. I've seen some complaints. Like, I've done a few videos on it here and there. I've seen a lot of, a lot of complaints about the cinematography, but I don't see it. I think color grading, it looks a lot more higher budget than it is, for what it actually has. There was some dodgy green screen. It kind of goes into the dislikes a little bit of dodgy green screen here and there, but on a whole, it was really, really good. I actually really like the pace as well. Short film, but pace was really good. Like someone commented on one of my videos and said it just builds to this crescendo, and I really like that. A lot of people have said that that's not a typical Rambo film, obviously, kind of all out and out from the start and things like that. But I really, really liked it. I really liked the fact that it built, because I think it built to something which was earned rather than just out and out from the start. So you had all the feel of a Rambo film, I think, and then you get to the ultimate kind of crescendo at the end. So yeah, I really like that. I think Sylvester Stallone, I've said it in my review of it, Sylvester Stallone owns this role as well as the Rocky Balboa. He embodies these roles perfectly. And he you're not going to watch a Rambo film for epic acting, but he does act reasonably well in this. So yeah, I mean, that's probably I don't know how long everyone else has spoken for, because I was late. So so that's kind of like my roundabout way.
No, that's good. I went off on a tangent too, because like I said, it's hard to get into the things you like without saying, well, there's this
Yeah,
issue,
you got
that
to
issue, but
you draw comparisons, don't you?
but it's definitely like an Unforgiven / Logan type Rambo movie, definitely.
and a bit of Taken as well, for sure.
Well, yeah, for the
There's even a
story
line
wise,
in
yeah.
it: "I will find you and I will kill you."
Yeah.
I mean, like my take on it was like this was basically Taken 4 with Rambo slapped on the title. I mean, like it's pretty much a Taken movie, yeah.
That reminds
To a
me of
point.
see Taken 2 and 3.
But see, now that's one of the aspects I did like about it that I didn't bring up, is that it isn't the same old Rambo movie. I mean, I did say that, but I kind of said it in a real rambly way, I guess.
But that's one of the reasons I'm very critical about this movie, is because it doesn't feel like a Rambo film. It doesn't feel like the character of Rambo.
Yeah, but how many times can you have the same things we've seen now in 2, 3, and 4? I mean, really, they're basically
Infinite
the
number of times.
same type of thing.
It's what makes a Rambo movie a Rambo movie. I mean, people are always saying, "Oh, the formula's tired," and then we get.
I kind of feel like this took it more back to First Blood. If you ask me,
I disagree with that totally. I feel like Rambo 4 was more like First Blood than this movie.
In the sense that this is not on a war field and this is at his home and the war comes home to him. I mean, I get where you're coming from, man.
I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, but I mean, I think that this was not a Rambo film. This was a Taken film with Rambo thrust into it, and they just slapped the title on there. And I can go into every single.
Let's do that. Let's right now in this moment, since you're already started, let's move into what we didn't like about the movie. And since you've got such a nice head start, continue. Why is this not a Rambo movie?
Well, first of all, he cut his hair. This is the Metallica syndrome. It's like he robbed himself of his power. He doesn't look like Rambo. At no point did he put on the headband. This is like making a Superman movie without him wearing a cape. I mean, like the most iconic image of Rambo is the long hair with the headband. And at no point did they headband it up in this movie. So it just kind of felt like Sylvester Stallone was just playing himself. He wasn't embodying this character at all. And so I felt like the character of John Rambo was missing. And a big theme of these Rambo movies has always been that Rambo's always forced to fight in other people's wars. And what I love so much about Rambo 4 was that by the end of that movie, he had kind of come to terms with his own war, his internal war, and he returned home. And I felt like it was such a great fitting end for that character. And so like when we came to this movie, this movie is depressing as hell. Like the final kind of send off that they give to Rambo is just, it's terrible. Like I understand that his surrogate daughter, niece, whatever, it's never really made clear what her relationship is to him, dies in the film. It's kind of reminiscent of what happened in First Blood Part 2 with that woman that he fell in love with in that movie. And so like, it's kind of tragic in a way. And I feel like it would have been so much more fulfilling if she had lived and he was trying to protect her from these people as opposed to, getting revenge on her behalf. I felt like this movie abandoned a lot of the themes that were present in the previous Rambo films. But most of all, there were just so many story elements that were just very contrived and very bad. I don't agree that the pacing of this movie was good. I felt like it was too rushed. I felt like there was not enough explanation, not enough reason why for I didn't know any of the supporting cast. I didn't know who the old lady was. I imagined that she was like his housekeeper, and that was
she's her grandmother.
I was talking about him. Like I don't know what his relationship was to these people.
Okay, well, yeah, that part because she calls him uncle, so there's that, and then he also says his daughter.
Uncle can be like.
So it could be like they don't really specify in which they have.
Tom, just let me finish.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying, but they should have said though that if it was one of the family members, I agree. There is what I was trying to say.
What I'm talking about is like in terms of the story, there was not a lot of exposition given as to setting up who these people are, how they relate to them. Like I never understood what. The girl's mother, who she was to John Rambo, and what their relationship was. Like, was he a stepfather or was he just a friend or an employer? And that's why she calls him uncle. Like the whole relationship between the supporting characters in Rambo was never fully fleshed out. I didn't feel like there was enough buildup between Rambo and the bad guys. The killing of the one brother where he cut off his head was very poorly done. I thought I would have liked to have seen that payoff, where I would have liked to have seen that confrontation as opposed to just cutting to the aftermath. like a lot of stuff that was contrived in this, like for instance, the girl who sells out the niece in Mexico, she literally calls up Rambo's house and is like, "Oh, what's her name? Never came home," even though she was the one responsible for it. And they tried to explain that away by her covering her tracks, but it was just like a very poorly done kind of like plot contrivance. There were like a lot of other things where like the brother that he killed, who was in the shower, all of a sudden he's on the bed fully dressed. Rambo not kind of realizing that these Mexican cartel guys are kind of watching him in that situation and kind of walking into that ambush, I felt like was very out of character for him. He healed completely after getting nearly beaten to death after 4 days. There was just, but the biggest problem I had was at the end during the final action scene where, first of all, I could see a cartel guy bringing like 5 or 6 dudes to beat up an old man for killing his brother. But he takes an entire army with him, like the amazing multiplying cartel members. Like just when you think they were all dead, like more and more of them just keep showing up. But beyond that, like the whole setup for the ending, even though I loved the action in the climax in the third act, the minute that those cartel guys get their car blown up and all of a sudden the entire farm explodes, creating a ring of fire that kind of traps them on the land, I might have stopped for a minute and reevaluated what was happening if I was those guys. Like it just seemed like they see Rambo take out like 5 or 6 dudes of theirs, like fully armed and armored guys, and he's popping in and out of these tunnels, and they're like, let's just go in the tunnels and get this guy. And that was another thing I had a problem with, was the whole issue. Like they never explained why there were these tunnels underneath the farm, and why Rambo built them, what purpose they served, other than to just be there so that they could have a shootout in them at the end of the movie. It felt like everything was just an excuse to have this final action scene, because that was what the whole movie was building up towards. So, there's a myriad of things I could dive down deep into and kind of pick apart, but I don't want to suck all the oxygen out of this thing. But I would just say that this is a very problematic movie, despite it being enjoyable. If you turn your brain off and you're like, this is just a dumb action movie, this isn't a Rambo movie, it's fine. But as a Rambo film, I feel like it fails on a lot of different levels, and that's why it's my least favorite of the bunch.
Well, that was quite a rant. Mr. H, as the most recent guest joining us, would you like to follow that up with what you didn't like, or maybe answer some of Matthew Catish's concerns if you disagree with them?
Have you seen Rambo 3?
Oh, yeah. I love Rambo 3.
Okay. Then I'm confused with what a lot of your issues are with this film. Because Rambo 3 was the most fucking ludicrous movie I've seen ever.
It was, but
a Russian dude gets what was it? He gets a noose around his neck. Oh. It's like a double whammy of a fucking kill. A noose around his neck. He falls down into a pit, snaps his neck, then blows up. And you're complaining that the Mexican cartel didn't run away when there was some fire.
Oh, I was just saying
that. Come on.
I was saying that there was some suspension of disbelief going on there, where I feel like the bad guys in this movie acted in accordance to the plot as opposed to acting realistically. But I will give you this. Okay, as ridiculous as that moment you just described Rambo 3 was, the climax in this movie where Rambo literally cuts out a guy's still beating heart and shows it to him before he dies is probably the most epic thing I've ever seen in a film. Like, that was absolutely amazing.
Well, look,
exactly what he said he was going to do.
Yeah,
I think everyone's points are valid, of course. Like, I think maybe you went into it wanting something else.
I was expecting more along the lines of what we got in the last movie, which was a very true to form Rambo film.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. Well, for me, I was just wanting. I literally just wanted a dumb action movie, to be honest, and I got it. And I think as well, I got it in a social political climate where this was much needed, and was probably a movie which was incredibly hard to be made. I think the point of the tunnels is answered because he's Rambo. He's suffering from PTSD, so it is his. It is that's ingrained in his character to have these kind of tropes lying around. It suffers from his, PTSD. I think it's explained in the movie because they do even say.
I know that I was listening for it. I was like, are they ever going to explain why he has these tunnels? And they never really do. If they do have a line of dialogue addressing it, it goes by so fast that I didn't even pick up on it.
Chris Persa in the comments has a good take on it. The tunnels was the easiest thing to explain away. He was a Vietnam vet, maybe a tunnel rat, and with his PTSD has been expecting the war to come to him since his first return home.
Okay, yeah, because I think he mentioned something about protecting. It's for protection or something like that.
But just say it in the movie, establish it.
They do, but that's one thing you're right about.
That's a writing failure, in my opinion, is that they
There is some moments where this movie, you can tell that there's a large chunk of this movie missing. Like something got cut somewhere, because you got the moment where he goes to Mexico, gets the shit kicked out of him, which I'll agree with you on that too, Matt. There's two different ways you could have handled that scene that would have been much better than they did. One, you could have had him sneak up like he does as Rambo, killing them systematically on the way up till he gets to the top and there's only 5 guys there to deal with. Or he goes in and tries to do the right thing by saying, look, you have this girl, I just want her back, I don't want any trouble, how much is it going to cost me? Then gets the shit kicked out of him and left for dead because they don't think he's a threat. See, there's that whole scene was played off kind of funky. But then when you have the next scene with the brothers where he's like, you should have killed him when I told you to, they could have just changed it to, you should have made sure he was dead instead of that. And then also there's a scene missing there because it's like they're getting geared up to do something and they go nowhere. I know there's a bit missing because there's behind the scenes footage of him in a black trench coat, in a black hat, at night in the rain. So I think a group of them already came after him once at the farm. And then between there and where he tells the grandma to leave, that's where that scene is. And I'm not even totally sure he didn't go back and kill the dad either.
Yeah,
because that seems like it's missing too.
I have a big issue with the whole like letting him live type thing. Like that just felt like.
I don't think he did. I think they cut it out though because the test.
No, I'm talking about when after they beat him up and
right.
The cartel guys like let him live. I feel like that's such a contrived thing because like there's no reason why they wouldn't have just killed him.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. If they would have just thought he was a whatever old man and just kicked the crap out of him and left him for dead there in the alley there, then it wouldn't have mattered. You know what I mean? Then he could have been more believable because otherwise they would have shot this guy on his way up. He would have never had a chance to get
just
up
lots of plot contrivances.
That's the one bit that I do agree with you on, Matt. But the rest of it, not so much, because these are cartel guys. They've got a lot of guys. All they got to do is snap their fingers. And I also felt like there's got to be some connection with the cartel and her dad. And that's where I was wondering if there wasn't a scene where he went with some cartel guys, and maybe that's where the dad got it in that scene or something like that.
The whole
there's something missing there.
Subplot was kind of dropped.
It was like something's missing. And other than that, though, I had no problem with the last part of the movie, other than it felt like the MPAA had their way with a lot of it. That's where I was at. But other than that,
I felt like Matt, one of your main issues.
None of those guys acted realistically, in my opinion. I feel like movies are always better when the bad guys are smart. And when they're like kind of like adjusting to stuff as it happens and making things hard for the hero, I just felt like this was just a duck shoot. Like, Rambo was going to just slaughter these guys, but everything, even to the point where Rambo got shot, like it was just like so like contrived. It bothered me. I would have liked to have seen a smarter way of handling that.
Mr. H, you were going to say something to what we were saying.
I was just going to say one of your main issues with respect to exposition is one of the reasons why I really liked the film. I fucking hate movies with needless exposition. I think they explained enough for the film within the film itself, because a lot of it's kind of irrelevant to the plot. Like, we knew that he's kind of an uncle character. We know that the person's the grandmother. We know that they're...
Do we though?
That they live together.
Yeah.
We do.
She is the grandmother. That's
we do know.
Where was it established, though?
She calls her grandmother and your granddaughter and my granddaughter and that kind of stuff. But what we don't know is if, like, because there's the uncle thing and he keeps saying his daughter. Well, obviously it's his adopted daughter. But is he really her uncle? Is that like Rambo's sister's daughter or something like that?
But I think all of that's irrelevant because in the monologue, he goes in the monologue. He goes and says, you know, these are people. You know, I thought I found my family and things like that. So I don't think it's really relevant, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
I think it's very relevant because from a writing perspective, because I look at these things as a writer, because that's what I do. It doesn't take a whole lot to just establish these things and then move on. Like it's a line of dialogue where, you know, it helps with certain audience members not to confuse them by just laying out, you know, what are the relationships of these characters? Who are they to each other? Oh, okay, I get it now. Let's move on. Like it's one thing to not spoon feed an audience, but it's another thing to like confuse them. And I feel like bad writing confuses audience members.
Well, I don't think it was very confusing. A lot of people in the chat are saying the same thing I did.
They think
that the grandmother was Rambo's father's housekeeper.
But how do you know? You don't know.
Do you really need that though, Matt? Seriously, to enjoy this movie?
I think there was a line where she said that you look so much like your father. That like the old woman said that at one point when he was sitting there. She was like saying that you look just like your father when he was sitting in that chair.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I think that he's thinking along that you served the family loyally for years or something.
Right, and that's what I kind of took from it. Yeah,
but I think it was a throwaway line.
Just the fact that we're debating it means that it was an issue, in my opinion. So,
well, really, you're the only one who's debating it, man. Let's be fair about that. We're all defending on the other side, going, we kind of just figured that.
Who's not excusing the bad writing in this movie?
That's nitpicky on my part. That's like the least of this movie's problems if you want to get into bad writing.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, where do you draw the line at what is actually bad writing?
Yeah, because that's pretty self-explanatory without that line.
But that's a whole different conversation right away where that line is drawn. Tom, you haven't chimed in so far. What do you think was examples of things that you didn't like with this?
Well, I did a little bit, to be fair, because I've been stepping all over everybody's side. But that's just because, like, I agree with both of you guys. There's, like I said, that cartel scene could have been fixed with that. I feel like there's a bit missing. Like, they came after him first again after everything, even though, you know, he went and he killed the one brother, and I think that's where he figured it was done or whatever, too. Or he knew they were coming after him again. Like, that part, like, all that last third of the movie was kind of choppy. Like, something's missing or something was reshot or a test audience didn't like something. Like I said, I have a feeling he went back and killed the father and the test audience didn't like it or something. You know, I mean, there's little bits here and there that feel like they're missing. But as far as, like...
sold her out got off easy, too.
Who's that?
The friend who sold her out.
Yeah, I think she died. I think that got cut out as well. I'll be honest with you. I
would have liked to have seen her die.
Because here's the thing. I think, if I remember, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she still had on the bracelet when they were looking for the guy, or did she give it back to him?
I think he took it off her.
I don't remember. Did he?
No, he took it. He took it and he gave, I don't remember. We didn't see him taking the bracelet from her.
That's what I'm saying. But I think she still had it on when they were seeking out the one guy and he goes, go, get out of here. I think she still had it then. So I think Rambo went back. That's what I'm saying. I think we're missing something here. I think he killed her and the father for selling him, for the girl for selling her out in the first place, and the father just because it's his fault, because he said it's your fault. You know, and I think the audience, like I did a test screening, and the audience probably reacted badly to it, and they could just cut it out. That's my feeling. That's just an opinion. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it could be. Any other issues before I chime in?
No, other than that, I just that first bit, like Matt had the issue with him going into the cartel like that. I think they missed an opportunity to make him either A, more Rambo-like, or B, show that he's trying to change, and that change just kicks him right in the face. You know what I mean? So, like, that was one of the only missed opportunities outside of the stuff that I feel was left out. Because even the pacing wasn't so bad as far as, like, because it was quick. It was only 90 minutes, basically, without the credits. So you're like, movie goes by fast.
It felt like this movie could have breathed a little bit more. Like, it was very fast-paced.
I mean, I felt the first quarter of the movie was handled well for the most part, pace-wise. It was when you get to that middle portion leading into the third act, because I feel like there's so much missing that something there does not.
An interesting thing is that they really kind of glossed over a lot of the sexual abuse that was implied in the movie. They kind of hinted at it, but they really kind of flinched at kind of tackling it, unlike the violence, where the violence was just very brutal and in your face.
Yeah, but I think that's good. I mean, how I don't want to watch a bunch of girls get raped in my Rambo movie, to be fair. I mean, to me that becomes gratuitous. Watching the inflictors of rape get murdered, I'm all fucking for. But I don't really want to watch people get raped.
And it's well enough implied, because we even know the one brother is the one who does rapes her first or whatever.
Yeah, and calls him a dog and stuff like this. Like that was enough for me. Like I know how bad these people are to be happy that they get butchered.
Not only that, what would it be gain other than if they did show anything that was just fodder to cut out for the MPAA so they could leave in some of the blood?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. As for me, I actually agree with a lot of you guys, and I agree with many of the points that you raised, Matt. The thing that I think stuck out to me the most, now that I've had a few days to digest the movie, is, as you say, the villains. And for this, I blame the director, which is to say that I also blame Stallone, because he was the one who appointed the director and the one who probably could and should have done better. It begins with the execution of the brother, where we basically see implied that he's in the shower, and then Rambo goes in with the sword, and then next we see that he's fully dressed, missing a head. I would have liked to see that guy, not necessarily naked in the shower, but I would have liked to see him see what Rambo said he was going to do. He wanted them to feel that death was coming, and there was nothing they could do about it. And we never saw that. There were so many opportunities to show that, and we never saw it. We could have seen it with that creepy brother. That would have been a good start. Instead, we just see that he has died, but we were robbed of the, dare I say it, gratification of actually seeing him die and whimper and cry before he knew the end came. I also agree with the point of all of the army of cartel soldiers, basically, that they are just complete non-playable characters, like in a video game, is what I was thinking at the time. Because here they're being killed left and right all around them, and none of them stops to think that, oh shit, you know what, are we really getting paid enough for this? I could die here. It reminds me of a movie that actually got that right, which is a completely different movie, but Crocodile Dundee 2, where there's like a similar situation where you have like a group of cartel people there as well, who are hunting Crocodile Dundee out in the outback of Australia. And he picks them off without killing them, but he still picks them off one by one, and he scares the shit out of them in the process. And you gradually see these people get more and more scared until several of them decide that, you know what, fuck this shit, we're out of here. They're not paying us enough for this. And I would have liked to see some of that with those cartel guys, instead of they just carry on completely oblivious to the fact that all of their peers are getting killed left and right around them. Of course, Rambo himself, he didn't help that by like first injuring and then murdering within like 5 seconds. Like, let them suffer, but let there be some screaming to increase the fear level of the others. And then finally, the same thing with the big baddie, the one who's like, I'm not going to say tied up, but like, you know what I mean, shot up against
pinned
the wall.
Up.
The end there. Yeah. We even didn't get to see him have any fear. We only saw him angry. We saw him angry when his brother was killed, but we saw no sorrow, no remorse, just like anger and determination. And the same when all of the guys died like flies around him. No fear, no second guessing, no, Jesus, this isn't going the way I thought it did.
Can I interject something just for a second here?
Yeah,
I
sure.
think I might know what happened there, and I could be wrong, of course. I don't disagree with you on the last guy, because, yeah, there's no way of fixing that. But I wonder, because it seems like there was one too many montages in this movie, that if that was another point where the MPAA or something or a test audience got in the way, because he could have systematically killed each and every one of those guys one by one without the other one knowing it, because that's what Rambo does until there's only one or two guys left. And the way it was cut with that montage with the Doors song, maybe it was cut that way because they had to cut it, or that was a choice. And originally it seemed, because it feels like to me that ending was set up to be more like First Blood. All the booby traps and all that kind of stuff, and the way you're explaining is the way that First Blood plays out. It doesn't just all happen at once. the guys come in and they a booby trap gets set off. You deal with that, and then another thing happens, and you go down a little longer, and you get to know these guys just a little bit more, and you start seeing them start to question what the hell's going on and everything like that. And I feel like a lot of that might have been chopped up for that montage. I could be wrong though, but yeah, I think you're right, because I did think that when we got to the point where he's killing like 20 guys, and within 20 seconds of a montage, it's like, okay, that's too much, too fast.
Yeah. But those guys just kept multiplying too.
Yeah, and that too. It's like, okay,
how many of these cartel guys are left, and they just keep showing up.
Yeah, so I don't know how. Yeah, they did a poor job of establishing how many there were to begin with too.
Well, I think there was at least 4 or 5 Mercedes G-Wagons, which are quite big. They do hold quite a lot of people. And there was only, I think, 2 which got blown up, as far as I'm aware. So there's, I don't know, but I think the numbers were about right. I think, based on how big G-Wagons are, they are actually quite big. They do hold quite a lot of people.
But yeah, just to go back to what Andre was saying, though, I do think maybe at one point there is there may be a version of this film where each of those deaths are a little bit more drawn out and more First Blood-like. I would hope, but you could be right too that it's just bad.
I don't think there is probably. I think that's one of, and if there was, that just goes to show that those would be the issues that I have with editing, because then they have removed what should be like the more satisfying moments of the movie, where you get like not just pure bloodshed, but you get like an emotional reaction, and that what was missing the most from the final baddie. And then I think back to, imagine if they had done what they did in the 2004 Punisher movie, where basically you have Tom Jane's Punisher, who is standing above the big villain John Travolta. Go figure. But anyway, basically he's just like laying it all out for him. I manipulated you into doing this. I killed first that son, now this son. I've taken everything from you. You have nothing left. Now I'm going to kill you too.
But even like going to your point,
kind of like missing
movie First Blood, the bad guy in that, Brian Dennehy's sheriff, like the characterization and the buildup of the confrontation between these two guys was just so well done. And even in Rambo Part 4, where you have like that Cambodian general who he doesn't have like a big role in the movie, but his presence is definitely there. And in that movie, it's more of a, this force, this army force that Rambo's kind of fighting against, this unstoppable force. But it felt like these two brothers were kind of more in the Brian Dennehy realm, where the movie wanted to set them up to have this very personal conflict with Rambo. And other than, ripping the guy's heart out at the end, we don't really get to see the payoff of the rivalry that's set up between these characters. And I felt like that was a big drawback to the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, all fair points. All right, guys, then we've established what we liked and what we disliked, but we weren't the only ones with dislikes, because there's also the reviewers. However, I would say that the reviewers were much less fair than us, because all of us actually pointed out things in the movie itself that we had issues with.
No, let's just talk about politics. Come on.
But
let's fucking talk about. Let's sympathize with rapists and murderers. Yeah, it's so racist to paint cartel members as actual cartel. Fucking course it is, dipshits.
Yeah. Before we get into this, I must say, at least as much as I disagree with Matt on this movie, at least his gripes are with the movie, and I respect what he's saying. Unlike these other critics, and I wouldn't care if the critics were giving this movie bad reviews. I would expect them to, but if they were just giving the bad reviews for the typical reasons, it would be like, whatever, No, they're turning it into a political circus, so their review gets attention.
I'll tell you what, best line of one review, and people in the chat, you can tell me if you've seen this review. I don't even like the line. No, this isn't me, I'm quoting. I don't even like to use the line as black as a man's heart can be because of the negative connotations. Are you fucking joking me?
Yeah, it was funny watching this movie. I went into it kind of expecting a little bit more of a political bent, but there was no political messaging in this movie at all.
Not one way or the other. So let's say this up front. And I looked as deep as I could into this movie for one way or the other. There is no pro-Trump America crap in this. There is no far-left crap in this. It has nothing to do with anything. The fact that she's Mexican has nothing to do with other than the plot. It's part of the
location.
plot. And the cartel is a real thing, folks. It's not like they're a made-up thing.
Yeah.
You know, to be stereotypical to Mexicans or anything like that. The cartel is very real and very dangerous. Andre said it in the beginning of the thing. They could not film this movie in Mexico. Why, Andre?
Because Mexico is too fucking dangerous and they get kidnapped and killed there, so they have to find a stand-in.
Oh,
Yeah.
by who?
By the Mexicans, or rather
Mexican
by the
cartel.
Honestly, all of those reviews, it's just so insane. When people are saying, oh, it's downright offensive. Offensive to whom? Because the only people painted as bad guys were cartel. So if it's offensive to the cartel, well, fucking cry me a river.
Yeah, what the hell? They shouldn't do that shit then.
You fucking
They shouldn't do that shit.
Though, it's not offensive to the cartels. It's not offensive to Mexicans. You really have to stretch to find a way to...
There's Mexicans that watched my review and gone, what? How is this offensive?
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
Exactly.
one
But I
shot-
will tell you
Fuck's sake.
who it's offensive to. It is offensive to everyone who suffers from, again, this isn't my words, I've taken it from elsewhere, but it's offensive to those who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, those who are completely rabid orange man bad, and everything that can possibly be construed as one way or the other supporting his narrative must instantly be silenced and shut down. That's who it's offensive
I
to.
will
It's
say
hilarious.
there's one shot in the movie that shows the wall.
Yes, I saw that too.
Just one, and it has
One
nothing
shot.
to do with anything.
Yeah, and it kind of implies that this is where the cartel is crossing in these tunnels underneath the wall. And but for the most part, every critic I've seen who has kind of taken the political torch to this movie basically is taking their own bias and injecting it into the film. Like, this film is so apolitical, it's not even funny. Like, earlier Rambo films are way more political than this one is, and I think that was actually one of the reasons that I didn't feel like it was a Rambo film, is because it left a lot of these like kind of themes of war is bad, anti-establishment stuff like that. Kind of tossed those to the side and in favor of just like a straight up action movie.
And that may have been in detriment to the story, like you're saying, Matt, but I believe at the same time it almost had to, because if they didn't, it would be fodder even more so for these critics, because then it would be exactly what they say it is. That's the problem. Because you're right, Rambo has always been an even as much of a symbol of the Reagan era he is so much against that establishment. You're right, and people always forget that. But I think to use that in this movie wouldn't have really worked for this movie's favor. I think this movie is what it needs to be at this time. And I said this before the show, if this movie came out 2 years after Rambo 4, I'd be in complete agreement with you that this movie was not needed. It was garbage. It was trash. It was just a cash in on the Rambo name. I think the fact that this movie was released now is more important than anything, because we have not had a movie like this. Well, we have had a few, but like that is just not unapologetically 80s action schlock. I don't give a crap what the critics think about that part of it, but if they're going to turn around and use it to make it a political, circus out of it, when it's none of these things that are claiming it is, I'm going to have to defend it. And of course I have to say it's not as bad as everybody says it is, because it's not anything. It's not harming anybody.
There is no politics in this movie at all.
Exactly. It's not hurting anybody. It's not preaching to you. It's not doing any of those things.
The people finding politics in the movie, it says more about them than it does anyone else. Because, again, all of these fucking reviewers with their 800,000 subscribers just because they got tits and ass, it's total bollocks. It's total bollocks. You're literally, when you can't even say the word black because you think that that's offensive, fuck off. Like, that is where you really know you've jumped the shark. Like, you really have.
The movie's also
shark.
unapologetically male. Like, it's very testosterone driven.
But it's for men.
That turns off a lot of these kind of soy boy critics
as toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Well, It's just honestly, it's
Well, let's break it down. That's what the movie is at its heart. That's why they're attacking it. It's because it's a white male protecting his family and going to whatever extent he has to do so.
and they're not killing
And
white
then
men.
when he
I bet you
fails-
anything, if he
Yeah,
was
and
killing
not
white
killing
men,
white men.
if he was killing white men, no issue. But because
Well,
he's
yeah, the
killing
problem is with
Massacres as
Rambo
an
4.
Asian European, it would have been fine.
Or
I don't
Agent-
remember anybody having issues with
Yeah,
Rambo 4, though.
You know, a lot of these virtue signaling people don't have any problem killing Asian people. So
That's what I was trying to say, yeah.
mental, utter nonsense.
And also, there's one
IGN's
thing
reviews.
I think is important to point out here, because everyone who's saying like, "Oh, this is like a MAGA hate fantasy or Trump fantasy or what have you not," this movie, or rather the concept for this movie, the script was, well, it was finalized last year, but the story has been in place since 2010, and the
Right.
concept has been in place since 2008. So we're talking about before even Obama was elected. Was the story always going to be Mexican cartels? Of course, you had like some back and forth and what it ultimately, before it ultimately ended up being that. But the intention was for Rambo 5 to feature him taking on cartels since before even Obama took office.
Right, and then as far as David Morrell, the author himself, speaking out on it, I totally respect him. Obviously, he's the creator of Rambo, but I think it needs to be said that A, he's probably jumping on this political bandwagon, and B, he was working on a script with Stallone when the studio said, no, the money men, we should say, basically, there wasn't really a studio behind this movie per se. The money men said, no, we want to do the Mexican cartel thing, and Stallone just had to say so.
I actually think Morell's criticism is a little bit valid. Like, he did not
To
like
a point.
Yeah, to
But
a point.
it's for him to say, though, the thing is what are his criticisms, though? If they're on par with yours, Matt, fine.
Yeah.
They are a little bit, because
They
the
are.
thing with Morell's criticism is
Is it-
that
Well,
the
no,
political thing.
no. He says he feels less of a human after coming out from it. So no, they're not
yeah,
the
he does
same.
both. He does
They
both.
are not the same. And also, as well, it's really important to note he has disowned the other movies as well. He's gone on record publicly and said he feels that they are nothing like his
Except for
films.
4, which is the most violent of the bunch. So go
again,
figure.
for everyone to hone in on the fact that he didn't like this film is
Well,
nonsense, because it's
his-
misleading. It's misrepresenting the fact that he hasn't liked any of them. He
His
even
big-
says the first one isn't anything like his
His
character.
big criticism about this movie, though, was like he felt that this wasn't the same character that he had created, and I have to agree
No,
with
but,
him.
but the first
To
one
me,
wasn't.
this was, it was more Rambo than this one was.
Well, in the book, Rambo kills everybody,
Sounds like
I
he's
mean-
had to
I mean,
change your
First
heart.
Blood is
including himself.
First Blood is not a faithful adaptation of
No,
this
it's not. But
after Rambo 4, like that, like it really felt like that the character had kind of come full circle. And then when you compare that Rambo to this Rambo is just so far afield from what that was. Like, I can understand his criticism is what I'm saying. It doesn't feel like the same character to me.
So to me, I disagree, because I feel like as the movie goes on, we have a character who's been changed now by the fact that he's a surrogate father for the last however many years. It's been probably 10 years since the last movie, because, that's how long it's been, pretty much 10, 12 years. And so he's changed himself, even though he says it in the beginning of the movie, I haven't changed. He still has had to, continue this daily routine of a life of a normal person. And this girl is what's got him through that. He even she was my heart. He says that. That's the whole thing. And like I said, once that's taken away from her, he goes deeper and darker into the depths, back into the machine he was. And I think by the time we see the end of the movie, that's kind of where it's at. He's now this mix between, well, I had this thing and I lost it, just like everything else in my life, but I'm still here. And however you want to interpret the ending, whether he's riding off into the sunset on the horse, just still alive, or if he's actually going to the other side, however you want to interpret that is up to you. But, I think it was like Rambo, like he got his last shot at redemption. He got to raise this girl that got taken away from him. And, I think that's where that one scene you're talking about, Matt, is important. And they kind of fucked up there. Is that should have been poignant and hitting it home, is that Rambo comes trying to do quote unquote the right thing and not use violence and end up having violence thrust upon him, and then him having to become the machine again. So anyway, sorry.
Well, yeah, the critics are all wrong about this movie. No matter how you get.
Well, the distinguish. Okay, Matt and I said I respect your opinion on this, but we have another situation here that I think we have an editorial coming soon, right, Andre? Where the big part of it is the distancing between the audience and the critics once again. And again, like I said before at the beginning, if it would be a situation where the critics are actually standing on things like you are, it'd be different. They're not, though. They're using other things as a crutch.
And I would say, like, if this was just a generic Stallone action movie, it would be perfectly fine. But I feel like because it carries the title of Rambo, I was expecting something more akin to what we got with Rambo 4, where, you know, I wanted to see more of that. And it just felt like they took too many liberties. It felt like the entire movie was a setup for the final fight scene. Like they had this set piece in mind that they wanted to do. And so they basically just threw a movie together specifically to pull off this set piece, which was these tunnels underneath this ranch that had no reason for being there whatsoever. So it just, I like the ending of the last Rambo so much because it felt like such a great way to kind of send off that character, to have him kind of finally come to peace, kind of stop fighting other people's wars and go home, because it was always like he was a wanderer. He never had a home. And to see the character kind of finally come home was a really good way, I felt, to like end his saga. And then with this one, it's so tragic. It's such a depressing and downer of an ending. Where basically, you know, when he's saying goodbye to that grandmotherly woman, I don't know what her relationship was with him, but, you know, she's like, well, I see you again. And he's just like, sure, you know, even though he knows like he's probably going to die. So, and the final shot of the movie where he just kind of sits in that rocking chair on the porch of his family's house, and he's bleeding from his gunshot wounds and stuff like that. And he's kind of thinking about all the terrible like fighting that he's had to do in his life, and he's lost like this one shining thing that he had to hold on to that he felt was good in his life. It's just it was a bitter ending to a character that I've grown up with and loved. I mean, I wouldn't quite say they Ryan Johnson did, but it came pretty close, in my opinion, to disrespecting the character.
That's pretty bold. Because there's still room for another movie where he could have another glorious.
I hope so.
Fight
I don't want the character to end with this.
I don't disagree with you there, and I've said it before. If this movie came out 2 years after the other movie, I would be harder on it. But anyway, Mr. H looks like he has something to say. So go ahead, sir.
Well, I would say then they did their job, because you actually want to see him come back. If he had just rode off into the sunset and all guns blazing and come out on top, then you'd been like, awesome, cool, no worries, I'm done with this now.
But I want to see him come back because I felt like they fucked it up. Not because...
Yeah, but that's where we just differ, isn't it? I guess that's the difference. Like, I liked the fact that he was a very real man in this, as opposed to some bombastic, pumped up. It was in line with 80s action heroes, but it also wasn't, because he was a very real man. He could get hurt. He could really get hurt. And it's more believable. It's more engaging at that point. So,
but I mean, I like to be said about the previous Rambo as well, and yet that movie was very well done as opposed to this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked that. I don't know. You can justify your likes and dislikes till the cows come home. I think we just have to agree to disagree on this. Like, I just thought it was a nice ending. I think it established it. That was going to pretty much be the way for the whole film. I wasn't expecting any other ending.
As I said before you showed up, I felt like this was a fun, good, decent action movie, but a bad Rambo movie. And that's pretty much my take on it.
I can see those complaints. I don't necessarily agree with them, but I can see how you would come to that. But I just think characters, I think something you said, Tom, like characters have to evolve with the times as well.
Right, and that's what I said.
I think it has evolved to a certain degree, but still kept its core values.
But I mean, if you want to evolve the character, like, let's talk about how age has affected Rambo. Let's talk about the pain that he's constantly in because of his wounds. Let's talk about the mental anguish. And
he wasn't walking very well, was he?
But I mean, like we didn't get to see like the whole like him having to like overcome his physical limitations in order to take on these guys. It was just like, oh, he's a Superman once more. Like we see it.
But the mental implication was that he built those tunnels, which you think you didn't know why he had them. But again, it is kind of said through the film. No one was allowed down there, because everyone would just think he's crazy. It's implied that it's there because of what he's went through. So
a lot of implications
has evolved.
That probably should have been spelled out a little bit more, in my opinion, at least from a writing perspective. But in terms of the character, like if you want to evolve the character, show him as this decrepit old man that has to basically rise up to the level of his former self in order to get the revenge that he so desperately craves. I mean, this is called character arcs. This isn't just like magically, like 4 days after he got beat up by an entire cartel, he's walking around killing people with a hammer. Like his entire eye was swollen shut, and then 4 days later, it's perfectly fine. Like there's a lot of things in this movie that are just skimped over, where it felt like they could have been explored more or dug down deeper into. Because one of the things that I always loved about the Rambo films was that the character himself is so complex, even though by the time the third movie came out, he's this larger than life, character. At its core, he's a very damaged and disturbed character. And I think that's why the fourth movie works so well, is because you actually get to feel this sense of him kind of coming to terms with this darkness that he's been trying to run away from his entire life. And once he finally accepts that, he's able to kind of put the past behind him and return home and live what we think is going to be like a peaceful, happy ending, until this movie came out anyway.
Yeah, speaking of happy ending, let's go into the box office a little bit to see what might come next. Because the movie has opened to, their final numbers aren't in, but it has opened to the vicinity of $19 million. Domestically at the US box office, yes.
That's quite good.
That's probably, depending on the finals, going to be third place after Ad Astra, which right now in this moment looks to have beaten it by a few $100,000. So that can flip by the time actual numbers are ready. What is absolutely certain is that it lost the number one place to Downton Abbey, of all things.
Yeah. If you had told me that Rambo would have gotten beaten by a movie about British butlers,
it's perfect counter programming, though. I'll give them that.
Well, there was a huge fan base for Downton Abbey.
I have to say, I actually went to see Downton Abbey because me and my wife, we had babysitters, and then we decided to go to the cinema, and she picked the movie, so I ended up seeing Downton Abbey. It's actually not bad, even though the basic story is who can be the best servant.
I'll tell you what, Ad Astra sucked.
Yeah. And that's another thing is that Downton Abbey has the female audience, whereas I feel like Rambo is strictly male. But I know I had to see Rambo a day later than I had planned to, because the buddy of mine who I was going to go see the movie with, he had to take his wife to go see Downton Abbey first. So, Downton Abbey is kind of like the date movie. It's the movie for the older crowd and stuff like that. And plus, it's got a huge following from the TV show. And the people who were really into the TV show were just, chomping at the bit to see this movie. So I'm not surprised it's number one, but I do feel like it's kind of a sad state of affairs that a Rambo movie can't really,
I think that'll change. I think that'll change next weekend, because Ad Astra is not going to be staying on that level by next week.
I didn't even know Ad Astra had come out.
It's honest. Don't waste your time. Do not waste your time.
Ad Astra was a very expensive movie, much, much more expensive than Rambo.
What was the budget?
With reshoot, Ad Astra was more than 100 million.
Having watched it, I would imagine close to 200 million. Having watched it, it is entirely CG for the most part.
Was Rambo like?
Whereas Rambo's listed production budget was $50 million, which honestly I think is pretty high, but that's what it was. And what I read is that the studio, they were counting on a $15 million opening weekend. If it could open to 15 millions and perform and have legs like the previous one, then with pre-sales, international pre-sales, they'd be fine. So financially, Rambo Last Blood, as of this moment, looks to be in the clear. It should be sufficiently successful. Of course, it depends on how it performs. It could collapse completely or continue to grow. We won't know that until next weekend. But assuming that it does good enough to warrant another sequel, because the movie does end in such a way that another sequel is possible. What would you like to see happen there? And would you even want a sequel? Matt?
The only reason I would want a sequel is because I'd want a happier ending for the character. I actually think that Stallone is just so old at this point that you can't justify putting him in in another Rambo-like situation. So I would actually like to see maybe like a reboot going forward or something like that. I mean, the character of Rambo is Stallone. Like, I think we can all agree on that. I just felt like this was such a piss poor way to send him off that, selfishly, I'd love to see like one more where things get wrapped up in a nice tidy bow and like the character's done justice and stuff like that. But honestly, like Stallone's like 72, 73 years old now. And like even when I was watching this, I was like, okay, a lot of his stuff is based off of preparation. This is why he's succeeding. So like, it was somewhat believable that this 72-year-old guy could take on an entire company of heavily armed and armored mercenaries and kill them. But at the same time, it's just like, what could you do with like a guy who's pushing 80, in a Rambo action style film? Like, I don't see it going forward. So if there were to be a new Rambo, I'd want to see a total reboot from the ground up.
Mr. H?
I don't know. I mean, I'd never say no to another one, but I liked this ending. I think it was good, to be perfectly honest. Fuck no to reboots ever. I don't even want like an Indiana Jones style reboot where they kind of pass the torch down. Hell no. And I agree with you. Yeah, like of course Stallone is Rambo, but I think that this is a good one to end on, but I would be happy with another one as well. But I think that they ended it fairly well. It did everything I wanted it to do, and I'm happy with the ending. I don't think it's anywhere near close to, a Ryan Johnson and The Last Jedi. It's nothing like that. I think it's very much everything that's set up is paid off. Maybe some of the execution here and there is not perfect, of course, but I think it ends in a way where we go, yeah, he could have survived or he could have died, but either way, he seems to be at peace with himself. To a degree.
I'm kind of going to go off of both of them. I agree with Mr. H. I could take or leave another one at this. I mean, I would love another one. I'm not going to say no to it, but this is to me enough of a Logan-esque ending to end on, and the way it ends, you can be like, yeah, maybe he did pass away sitting in his chair, and that's him, riding off into, the next plane or whatever at the end of the montage. Or he could just be riding his horse into the mountains and plan on living in the mountains like a mountain man for a while. Who knows? But if they do another one, I have a feeling that it'll be him being sucked into some other skirmish somewhere, probably more in the lines of Rambo 4, just to make Matt happy. But unfortunately, just not to break your heart, Matt, if he does another one, he's going to die. Like, he will die at the end of this. If they do a Rambo 6, it's going to be the death of Rambo. I guarantee you he'll have him go out in some big blaze of glory, yeah. So.
Which I think would be too cliche. Too on the nose.
I'm just saying, I have a feeling that's what would happen.
No, of course it would. Absolutely,
I'm just speculating, of course. But,
No, you're right, though.
Cliche is good, though. I feel like it would be fitting for the character to go out as a hero or to go out happy. I would like to see that.
As for me, I agree with 2 out of 3 of you. I absolutely do not want a reboot. There is one Rambo, and it's Stallone. I don't care what David Morrell wrote back in the day, because what has happened is that the movies have absorbed the Rambo character. Rambo is no longer the character that he wrote in First Blood. It is now Stallone. So there's that. And I would like one more Rambo movie, because that way we would have two trilogies. We would have the original Rambo trilogy, and we would have the new Rambo trilogy.
DLC DME agrees with that.
Exactly, featuring a bigger storyline, where we basically have like the lost Rambo, where it starts out, and then here we then have the much darker movie, and then some other kind of movie. I don't know what story I would like to see. What I will mention is that this has not been publicized very much. But did you know that at one point Sylvester Stallone was in talks for taking over both writing, directing, and starring in a Punisher movie? This was before they landed with Punisher Warzone with Lexi Alexander, or maybe it was after, I don't recall. But anyway, at one point he was in talks for that. Nothing happened with it at all. But at the end of this movie, he's kind of like in the same position as the Punisher. Everyone who meant something to him is dead, killed by criminals. And here towards the end, he gets up. Maybe he decides, I still have work to do. I don't know, but that's like one way they possibly could take it. I'm not saying that would be the right way to take it, but
what about doing a prequel of his time in Vietnam?
Oh, hell
It's
no.
interesting you bring that up, Matt. That was already on the table at one point, and Sly was actually supposed to direct that. But yeah, it was supposed to be about him in Vietnam, a prequel or whatever. I don't know if it was going to have wraparounds or what the plan was, but that was something that got tossed to the side too.
Yeah. No, the only way that I would be remotely interested in that is with a CGI animated, digitally de-younged Stallone. I wouldn't be interested in a recast young Rambo. I wouldn't be able to accept it as a canon movie. It would just come across like a spin-off.
Deep fake style.
I was just going to say, this deep fake is opening up some doors to where, like, things like Rogue One, I don't want to hear the excuses anymore. These guys have no excuse. They can start doing some really cool shit.
If they do it that way, that's the only way I would be remotely interested in it.
That's what you do. You find a guy whose body is, about right for that age of Stallone, and then, you deep fake a young Stallone face on there, and if you can either have Sly do the voice, or if you can find somebody who remotely sounds like Sly, I mean, I don't know, it don't matter.
Yeah,
There's ways around it.
The woman in Rogue One.
But I don't have the body.
Well, you can do the voice.
Mr. H has the body.
Yeah.
No.
No, get you, Matt.
Well, we deep fake Mr. H's face onto my face, and we can go from there.
Or the other way around. Anyway, guys, we have some super chats that we need to address real quick, because we've gotten some of them, and they've been sadly omitted for so long. So now it's time to give our donors their dues. Sister Harrow sent us $5 Australian, saying, start the live stream with a cha-ching. Yesterday's marathon live stream was thumbs up. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And then Captain Hare sent us a $5 super chat saying, which scene was better? The one where Rambo killed that guy, or the scene where Rambo killed the other guy? I'm torn, but then again, I haven't seen it. Well, see it and then you'll know.
The one where Rambo rips out the still beating heart and shows it to him before he dies. That's the scene. It was better.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So, spoiler alert. But yeah. Dr. Coffin Nails also sent us a $5 super chat. This one was really poignant, I think. David Morrell should shut up and collect his check. Rambo transcended his book long ago.
Yeah.
Hard to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sometimes where you just got to kind of keep your mouth shut and just let the cash cow be milked and not say a word, because he killed Rambo in his original book, as we pointed out. So you can't really say he owes Sly a lot. I do think a lot of his feelings are rooted in the bias that they didn't go with his script, to be honest with you. that might
And
be a
then it's a
good
question
candidate.
of would we as audiences have liked
I
him
don't know.
to them to go with his script? We don't know what his script was, and we don't know that he's the right guy to write this incarnation of Rambo, which is not the Rambo that he wrote.
That's
Yep,
the
very
thing
true.
is we'll never know unless they decide to go with that for a 6th film, maybe. But
Yeah.
yeah, because yeah, this is the one we always figured we were going to get. So
Overall,
yeah.
though, I'm happy we got this Rambo movie, and I really hope that we get another, because it would be cool to complete the trilogy and give those who had grievances with this movie, and there are some genuine grievances with this movie. Let's not deny it.
Right.
It just shouldn't be that it's a Trumpian fantasy.
No. Like I said, it's a 7 out of 10 at best, probably, but the timing is more important. I know, Matt. Go ahead and shake your head. I gave Rambo 3 a 6, so be quiet. You like Rambo 3. Shush. But yeah, like I said, I would be less easier on it if it was 2 years after Rambo 4, and maybe even 5 years ago I'd been less easier on it. But now we just haven't had a lot of movies like this that I got this pumped for, and it did what it was supposed to do. All flaws aside, that's the thing that counts. Is this movie got my adrenaline going? I was glued to the screen, and this is another thing I've noticed when I've gone to the theater is, there's always a group of teenagers that goes and they got to yak and schmack and be on their phone and giggle and hoot and holler throughout the movie and not even pay attention to what's on the screen. As soon as the first 5-10 minutes of this movie got going, they all shut up except for they reacted when they were supposed to react. So it was nice to see that, okay, this generation that's younger coming in, these critics may be trying to appease them with their SJWAs or whatever, but they seem to enjoy it. They got it and they liked it. I don't get what this whole criticism with it is, other than the stuff like Matt said. I mean, that's a little different because that's legitimate gripes as to the film itself. If you're not going to have legitimate gripes, then I don't think you should be commenting on the film. It's none of these things that they're claiming it is. So
Well, you're going past being an actual movie reviewer at that point, aren't you? You're not reviewing the movie; you're reviewing its social political message.
right,
Or you're
exactly.
or you're
You
preaching.
are just, yeah.
Or like Matt Stone said about Dave Chappelle, you're just the critics are afraid to give their honest opinions because then it's going against the whole political agenda and culture. Yeah.
But look how it's backfired on them. You go to some of these people's reviews; they are being ratioed to fuck, and absolutely trashed in the comment section as well. And good, I'm glad.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah, right. Really, rightfully so. You're not being a movie reviewer at that point. Comment on the technical aspect of the film. And then you can comment on all of those things, and then you can give your side opinion and say, look, I enjoyed this or I disliked this technical aspect. From my own personal perspective, oh yeah, this message here and there I may not have liked so much, but as a movie, it was this. Separate them. Don't just don't
Right, like I
lead
said, I could
with the
easily,
social political
yeah, I could
review.
easily
That's
ignore
not-
the it's just typical Rambo schlock reviews. I would have no problem with those. I'd expect those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that's the age that we live in, for better or worse. Mostly worse.
Definitely worse.
Yeah. And with that, I would like to thank the entire panel for joining me, and I would like to thank every single one of you in the comments for watching us and for chiming in your opinions along the way. So thank you, Dr. Meatball, Brad O'Jacko, Knutson Yachin, sort of a butch that, Red Syrup, Andres Mesa Valdez, John Wong, Neil, of course, always a pleasure to have Neil here. Grace Randolph, yeah, I'm sure she isn't here though, but he mentioned her. I'm sure she took a lot of heat, and again, rightfully so. Optimus Prime, Mavericks, MX, Black Phoenix.
we got another super chat.
Thanks for joining us, every single one.
Andre,
And Andre Farkerson, great to see you. It's awesome that you're commenting. And thanks for the super chat. He sent us $2 saying Rambo versus Super Soldier story may have nuked Fridge. Yeah, that it would have. Thank God we did not get the Rambo versus Predator they were threatening us with for a while there.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell Matt. It could have been worse. Could have been
Can
much
always be worse.
That's the thing. It can always be worse. We're
That
trying
was kind of, yeah. I was like, just don't jump the shark on this one, and as long as it's fun, that's all I cared about by the end. Because it's been 10, 12 years since we've had a Rambo movie, and I was just so happy to go into a movie and it not have preach at me, and to be able to want the bad guys to die, to want Rambo to succeed, to give a shit about this girl. I mean, that scene's heartbreaking when she, that when she passes in the car. So I mean, this movie did have a lot of heart. I feel like I don't think you're giving it enough credit. Now, I mean, at the same time, it does have a lot of technical issues and some pacing and story issues here and there. But I do think that may be more to do with the editing than the actual film, like the story itself per se.
Well, let those be the final words for the day. Matt, where can people find you?
If you want to check out my books and see how good of a writer I am, you can go to Amazon.com and search for Earthman Jack. You can also go to kadishbooks.com, KADISH books.com, and that takes you right to my Amazon page. You can also check me out on YouTube by going to Kadish Video, KADISH video.com. That'll redirect you right to my YouTube channel. So you can subscribe there if you want to hear more of my rantings on entertainment news and analysis. And of course, follow me on Twitter at Matthew Kadish down there. That's pretty much it.
Mr. H, it was a pleasure to have you join us tonight. Where can people find you?
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sorry I came so late. Well, predominantly just my YouTube channel, Mr. H Reviews. I am on Twitter, but I don't tend to twat that much, but you can over at Mr. H Reviews. And I'm maybe sometimes, very rarely, on Instagram. It's mainly my dog, which is right behind me. You can see him right over there.
It's on the other side, yeah.
And that's Mr. H Reviews as well.
Tom, everyone here knows where to find you, but you can say it anyway.
Well, of course, here at Midnight's Edge After Dark, and I too am unfortunately on Twitter. God, you got to stay off that thing. That thing is a cesspool.
Yeah.
And as for me, you'll always find me here at Midnight's Edge. And technically, I am on Twitter too, but I'm really lousy at it. So if you message me there, expect a response in like 3 weeks or something. So, yeah. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Have a great evening, day, morning, wherever in the world you are. Bye.
Take care, everybody.